Hi, I'm Tim, and welcome to Watch You Want. Thanks for logging on. Well, today is Wildcard Wednesday, and with Mike Michaels still backlogged, Brian Govberg joins me tonight. Brian is here with a collection of watches, and we're going to talk about all of them. But first, I want to remind you that Watch You Want watch reviews is where you can get the quick hit, the phone-friendly 5 to 7 minute videos of me doing my old-style watch reviews with watches like this beautiful Vacheron Constantin 49 150 steel black dial chronograph that Brian has brought to join us, and I have that review and many others at Watch You Want watch reviews. But if you already own that watch or you're thinking of buying it, what you need is our Watchbox app. Now you can get this on our Govberg Watches website. It's on the app sub-menu at the top. It allows you to, it stores your whole collection, right?
It does.
And it prices your whole collection.
And it prices your whole collection. So you can type in any reference or model number for pretty much any watch, and it'll pull up the data right away.
It's also a fun viewer of video. You'll get the stream of my watch reviews that's pre-programmed into the app. Plus, it's configurable so that you can see any news source you like, and we've got at least 16, I think we're pulling from now. And you can customize the feed you like if you just want vintage, if you just want chronographs, if you're into divers or a particular brand. So you get a almost curated content stream plus the videos. Check out our Watchbox app on govbergwatches.com. Brian, let's play this or that. Okay. So my theme tonight was, a lot of people were asking me, why don't you talk about watches that 9-to-5 workers can afford? And I presume they don't mean like 9-to-5 hedge fund managers.
Okay.
So we're going with two affordable independents tonight, Habring versus NOMOS. Here are the candidates. There's the NOMOS Ahoi Datum Signalblau. This is a recent release. It is the Ahoi sports watch, 200-meter water resistant, 40-millimeter steel case, Signalblau, basically bright blue dial. Their own DUW, I believe it's the 5101 in this movement, and so it's their entirely in-house caliber with their in-house swing system escapement. $4,660. Okay. Separately, the Habring Jumping Second. Now this is about $4,700 US. 42 millimeter stainless steel, only 50 meters water resistant. It's not a sports watch, but it does have a display case back. And what you'll see is a highly modified Valjoux 7750 as modified by Richard Habring himself. You can get it with a power reserve, you can get it with a lacquered dial, you can get it with automatic or manual winding, or a grand date. There are options here. Which one do you go with and why?
I think I would probably go with the Habring Jumping Second. I mean, they're both German, yes?
Well, they speak German, they're Austrian.
Okay.
Volkermarkt Austria, and yeah, so is it just down to the exclusivity?
I mean, I think it's down to the exclusivity of the Habring. I think that you're not going to see too many of them on people's wrists. It's definitely, even though NOMOS is probably considered a niche brand amongst collectors, I think Habring's like a whole nother level.
Yeah.
I really also like their chronos, but I'm trying to think if the retail falls into the 9-to-5. I think it does, and I mean, it has the different color pusher.
I tried to get them both below 5,000. I do believe their Doppel Chrono costs a little more than that. Not much though. They're all very fairly priced. In fact, both of those brands are very fairly priced across the board.
Yeah, and I mean, I do like NOMOS. We actually carry NOMOS, but I don't know that the Ahoi Datum would be the watch that I would choose. Okay. And I'm not a big fan of like the mesh strap that it comes on.
Yeah.
But it's a great watch, and you can put it on a leather strap, and they look good.
For me, I think just because there are so many customization options on the Habring, I would probably say, you know what, I go with the blue dial, I go with the automatic winding, I pay a little bit more to add a date. Yes, I add a date to a simple watch, I know, I'm a criminal. But I think that's the one I would pick, but I have to say both of these are really sweet, kind of under the radar brands. The Habring is just one of those brands where you'll have like an email relationship with the people whose names are on the dial, Richard and Maria Habring. So I think there's also an experience beyond the watch that I think that draws me to that one.
How many watches do you think they're making per year, Habring?
Well, they don't make more than a few dozen of anything. I think at most like 150 to 200. I don't think they're making much more than that.
Yeah. So.
And all their parts are made in Austria too, with the exception of some tiny bits. So as a company that has a nationalistic ethic in all the right ways. Okay, so now from the 9-to-5, this or that, people ask me, if you were to build a collection for $20,000 or less.
We're not doing what we're wearing?
Oh, well, we can, absolutely.
I mean, I feel like I wore a special watch today for
Let's do wrist shots.
You go first.
Okay. So this is a watch you guys know well. This is my Memovox 2. It's a vertical trigger chronograph which means that, you know, it's designed to be fat-fingered by people wearing racing gloves. So the idea is Memovox. It's inspired by old Jaeger dashboard instruments in Aston Martins. And you do get that look, 270 degrees, the dial calibrated, blank on the bottom, visible chronograph hammers, a cool series of 750 pieces from the mid-2000s. What are you wearing tonight?
You know so much more about your watch than I know about my watch.
I own my watch.
I own this one too.
Okay, fair enough.
So this is a Omega Seamaster 300M. It's a discontinued variation of the watch. It is in titanium with a bright blue dial and luminescent indexes. What drew me to the watch is both the dial itself, the fact that it's titanium.
Yeah.
I wanted like a rugged titanium sport watch that I could just beat the hell out of. And I'm a big fan of like luminescent indexes that look luminescent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you mean it's got a little bit of a green tinge
It's got like
to
a
it.
green tinge to it. And so I got it originally on the bracelet, and then I threw this NATO strap onto the watch.
Well, now the cool thing about that watch is that it has a lot of color on the dial. I don't know if you guys are picking this up in the wrist shot camera, but it's almost like an iridescent blue, like radioactive
And it glows.
Cherenkov
The lume is
radiation.
absolutely out of control. So I mean, you're not going to be able to see it here, but it's a great watch, and it's part of my 20 that we're going to talk about soon.
Live lume shots, guys. It's a technology we don't have yet. But yeah, that's a very cool watch. And I remember I lost sleep over that dial when I was in high school looking at it at the Tourneau at Roosevelt Field on Long Island. Good call, wrist shots. Okay, now speaking of watches that we would love to own and what we would do with a budget, we were talking about 3 watches and a collection with a price cap of $20,000.
Okay.
So I think both of us went the route of spreading it around. The alternative, and I think you delved a little bit into that because you went
hit
with
different buckets.
Yeah, exactly. I think you put most of your money into one watch, but not all. So how did you build your 3-watch collection?
So I started by what I think I would wear the most, and I wanted like a high-end casual sport watch that you could dress up or dress down, a little bit of optionality if you ever wanted to take it off a bracelet or change to a strap, from a top brand. And you know, if you're capping it at 20, you know, pretty much Patek Nautilus is going to be off the list. That really only leaves you with, I would say AP. I mean, there's a lot of brands, but in my mind, AP and Vacheron for that kind of look. And I landed on
Since we've got the watch, I'll
yeah,
pull
we've
it
got
up.
the watch here. So it's actually part of our pre-owned collection. Is the Vacheron Overseas Chrono, the discontinued variation of the watch with a black dial and a bracelet. So I actually own the Deep Stream, which is the same watch but with like a gray dial, titanium bezel on a rubber strap. But for the purposes of this, you know, I would probably get more use out of this watch.
Definitely. And in general, when you can get a watch on the bracelet or the strap, even if you prefer the strap, get the bracelet for the value.
Cheaper.
Put it in the box and put it on
Exactly.
the strap.
So, and it's generally cheaper to get the strap and the buckle after the fact than it is to get the bracelet after the fact. But no, so I thought this was great for every day. I love the older variation of the watch. I love that it has the big date. And it doesn't bother me that it's not an in-house movement because it's a great movement and there's going to be 0 issues with it.
Yeah, it's a Frederic Piguet, you know, column wheel. It's got a vertical clutch. You can run it continuously. The double-digit date complication is Vacheron's, and it's legitimately water resistant. 150 meters. It's not a dive watch, but you can swim with it without
Yeah, I mean, it's got the
reservations.
screw-down pushers, which is great, and for the purposes of this, even though the retail's well over 20, like you can get them pre-owned at quite a good value. So that's how I'm mixing it in. So you said pre-owned or new?
Of course, and so this is just under 13,000 pre-owned, and I'll throw this in. This watch is exactly halfway between, in terms of image and size, it's exactly halfway between something like a traditional Audemars Piguet Royal Oak and an offshore. It strikes a balance between those two without losing any of the elegance of the underlying kind of formality of Vacheron. It doesn't have the brute presence of the offshore, but nor is it as delicate as something like a 5 ATM water-resistant Royal Oak. I really like that it splits the difference.
Yeah, and I think with
the
the popularity of the Royal Oak, you see so many more people wearing them that this is, it's somewhat under the radar, so to speak. So that was that. Second watch on the list is the Grand Seiko re-edition for the 130th anniversary. So this is a limited edition of 1,960 watches for the world.
I'll be the hand model.
And they did a steel, platinum, and gold variation of the watch, and they've done absolutely incredible. So They've kept true to the roots of the original watch. They changed the case a little bit, but it's got a much more updated and better movement with some of, I think the mainspring is their new technology, and then
the power reserve in this is excellent. 3 days.
Yeah.
It is manually wound. I should throw that out there. This is, for those keeping score at home, this is the SBGW 253. There were three, one in rose gold, one in platinum, and one in steel. This one, 1,960
This is the
pieces.
steel one.
Yeah, this is the steel one, but the case back medallion is yellow gold, 18 karat. This is the one to wear. A nice watch. There are upgrades, slight upgrades in size, proportions, details. The dial is much better made. The hands are much more finely detailed. It features a double curved sapphire rather than the plexiglass of the original from 1960. But this is definitely the one to wear, far more so than the gold and the platinum reeditions.
yeah. So I thought that this was the perfect sort of, I could wear this, wear this for dress, wear this with a suit, even though you could wear the Vacheron with both, but. And I like that you could probably take it off the black croc strap and put something more casual on, like a brown or a suede or something like that, and dress down the watch. And, I'm a big fan of Grand Seiko. I think they're doing amazing things. And again, I love the watch the moment I saw it. So this is actually another pre-owned piece that's available on our website.
I'm going to throw this out. Weber fan 1234. I obliged. I wound the watch. Sorry about that. He wanted to see it in motion. Grand Seiko just doing great things this year with those reeditions. Real sensitive, kind of, I think, loving treatments of their history. Definitely not watches designed to play to the market, because not too many people remember the original 3180 caliber reference from 1960. But that's a very nice homage to their history and a great versatile watch. Now your third watch.
My third watch is actually, well, I had like a small amount of room left, so I had to think, like, what do I want to fill the gap? And I happened to have been wearing the watch that was perfect. So these pre-owned Seamaster 300Ms, you can get, mine doesn't have boxer papers, but you can get them for about $1,500 without boxer papers. If you can find that, $1,500 to $2,000. So it really fit into the niche for me, and I thought it was like a cross between, I mean, it's not actually even a cross between the two, but it's much more sporty than these. So this is the watch that I would probably wear if I was going to wear a watch to the beach, that I don't care, if it goes into the ocean, get salt water on it, and I can really beat it up and not care.
The nice thing about those watches too is, as long as you don't do something truly horrendous to them, those watches, you'll always be able to sell them pretty much for what you paid for them. Those pre-coaxial Seamaster 300s are the best watches you can buy for the money. They're thin enough to be dress watches, they're rugged enough to be sports watches, they have a permanent market of people who absolutely love them. And for better or worse, the James Bond connection for that family of models will always keep the public mind share high. So, Brian, you busted your budget by about $1,000, but I'm going to let you fly.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so now I've got my 3-watch collection, and you're all wondering if I was going to do like nothing but JLC. I threw one in there, but I wanted to mix it up, because I know you guys out there, you're not necessarily mono-brand super fans like I am, but I can give you a good 3-watch recommendation that includes a chronograph. By the way, just to keep track, Brian gave us a collection that included a chronograph, a dress watch, a diver, a general sports watch, and a limited edition. Mine will give you a chronograph, a calendar function, a moon phase, a diver, a dual time/traveler for about $17,500. So my first choice is the Zenith El Primero Chronomaster. This is the watch we remember from the late 90s, early 2000s. For those keeping score, it's the 010240.410. Beautiful and overpowering with a black dial and a steel case. This is a chronometer, it is a chronograph, it is a triple calendar, and it is an El Primero. And you can have that watch on your wrist for about $5,500 to $6,500. $6,500 being really good condition with boxes and papers. Okay, I had to throw one in. Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Compressor Memovox. This is the original Master Compressor from 2002 with the caliber 918 inside. It's a diver, 100-meter water-resistant internal bezel. It's an alarm. I would rather travel with an alarm than a dual time. That's the all-purpose complication for me. It's my favorite complication.
We just took it in white gold, actually, I think, with a gray dial. That's super cool.
Stop reminding me.
You need to have that watch.
He's not wrong. But the key thing about this one is that it gives you versatility. It's not so big that you couldn't wear it in formal attire, and yet it's also not so small that, you know, a decade and a half on, we start to feel that it's dated. It was a perfect mix between a little bit of heritage design from the Polaris 68. Remember, we didn't have tribute to Polaris back in 2002, but also some original ideas from the 2000s that have worn well. It is a polarizing watch because of the compressor crowns, but make no mistake, like Panerai locking lever, they work superbly and they do solve some of the underlying problems of conventional screw downs. Master compressor Memovox in steel, 5500 to 6500. Okay, finally, I'm throwing in a dedicated travel watch, and since I think we both sided with the Habring couple, Richard and Maria, earlier in our segment, I'm going to throw a favor to NOMOS because I love them deeply and I love them as a brand, and I love the NOMOS Zurich Weltzeit Nachtblau even more.
It's my favorite NOMOS by far.
This was like, I think this was like a watershed watch for them. The basic watch was important and memorable and useful, but the night blue dial is just like,
amazing.
It sizzles. Like there's blue and then there's blue. And if you see the watch, you know what I mean. $4,500 to $5,000 pre-owned. If you want to buy one factory fresh that's never had anyone else's DNA on it, $6,100. A great watch, an in-house caliber, a decent case size at 40 millimeters that's neither too small nor too big, always welcome in any attire. This is a great value.
And it's easy to use.
It is.
Which is like you really want in a world time, is to, like, that you don't want to have to be futzing around with it while you're traveling. It's like, you know, it's super straightforward, and it's a no-brainer.
He's absolutely right, because it's a lot like the JLC geographic complication, where you set your reference city and then it gives you the time for that time zone, so you don't have to like boggle your mind looking at one of those dizzying world time dials, and at the same time you don't have to mentally do the math and figure out how many time zones you're jumping forward or backward as you travel. You just set your reference city and it gives you the hour. So that would be my collection, and you're wondering if I did an all JLC $20,000, it'd be the Master Compressor Memovox, it would be a Reverso Duo, and it would be the 37mm Master Moon. Okay, I had to throw that in. Brian, let's talk about storylines over the last half decade, and 3 brands that have really transformed themselves in the last 5 years.
Well, we each had to do 3, correct?
We did,
okay,
yes.
So my first one is AP. I think that under their new leadership, you know, they've already announced that they're cutting production to 40,000, which I think worldwide you're starting to feel a tightening of the availability of their best pieces, and then a strengthening in the pre-owned market. They've done a great job as well of cutting the production of gold pieces, so they've become more desired, and then starting to trim down the fat of the collection and focus on core. So I think for a long period of time, AP was doing limited editions left and right. You didn't know what was going to be available. And there was different watches for different parts of the world. And you know, you just couldn't repeat that process forever. You couldn't just every year have to come out with a different offshore to satisfy everybody. So
and they cut back on the limited editions, especially on the offshore side.
Pretty much all but stopped for a few years. And I think that they put more energy back into the Royal Oak again, which was super smart. And because people started wanting an upscale, I think, you know, sport dress watch that wasn't a Rolex, you didn't have too many good options, and Nautilus just became virtually unavailable.
Yeah,
so
this is true.
Given the price points of the 15300
15300
and then the 15400 and so on and so forth, you know, I think that the brand has done a great job of positioning itself and getting chic again.
And I think you're seeing that in terms of people paying list for the watches globally, wait lists again for Audemars Piguet products. And I remember a few years ago when Francois Henri moved in, and I want to say it was like 2012, 2013, he started cutting the price of gold watches to actually reflect material costs.
Yeah.
He started paring down the collections. Royal Oak and Offshore took the biggest hits in terms of SKUs, in terms of models. Realistically, I think
they've also cut the dealer network worldwide by half. So, I mean, you can obviously see that there's a plan to probably go a little bit more vertical.
Yeah.
They have some of their better pieces going to, you know, to the boutiques. I mean, again, people probably know they came out with the all ceramic perpetual. You've got the double balance open works. So they've done a great job. And I think you're seeing the pre-owned prices, even on the older Royal Oak Chronos and things like that. I mean, zooming back up. So, I mean, they've really repositioned themselves in the last 5 years.
The brand equity has completely done. I think they were in danger of becoming something other than, you know, a quintessential Holy Trinity like stalwart. I think there was a risk in the late 2000s with stuff like the Royal Oak Offshore Survivor. Everyone who ever held an F1 Super license was getting a signature edition watch. And today, like you said, they're closing doors, pairing models, they're reevaluating price, but also constraining supply. And one thing that they've done that I've noticed is that they've really cut down on the use of contractor service agreements. There was a period when a lot of independent watchmakers and shops were authorized to service Audemars Piguet, particularly in Europe. They started closing a lot of those down.
100% closed in the US. So any watch that needs to be serviced now has to go back to Audemars. To me, that's a detriment. I think that they're making a mistake. I think that there's a lot of places that are qualified to work on the watches, and that it slows down repair times, and if there's one thing that a customer hates more than anything else, it's A, having warranty work that takes a long period of time, or B, having a watch that you've been wearing every day have to go out for service for 3-4 months. So.
I do think that from a quality control standpoint, they made the right move. It does have a knockdown effect on wait time. But I'll say this, they took responsibility for what was happening in Europe with service, and they really took command of that situation. The wait times were a little longer, but the quality assurance is higher. And in the US, they did put a tremendous amount of money into the Clearwater service center.
Yeah.
Like I know from being down there in Florida for 3 years, that complex turned into a little basically a little Switzerland in Florida.
Well, the service isn't cheap, so they're making it
That's
back
true.
brick by brick.
So we had a question along the lines of what would it cost to service a Vacheron Constantin Overseas? We had the question earlier in the thread. Someone was asking what it would cost, for instance, to service this watch here. And by the way, we are going to give our opinions on Sarpaneva watches in just a moment, so stay tuned.
So, I mean, my guess is probably, it depends on really what it needs. I mean, the big thing with all these watches, you know, basic services and overhauls are somewhat fixed, probably anywhere from $700-800 to $1,300, I would say. The big component is whether or not it needs movement parts, and or a new crystal or things like that can become expensive. So my guess is you're probably looking at about $1,000 or so, give or take. I mean, that's just a ballpark estimate.
And I'll say that this watch right here, which is in some ways more complex and certainly has a more complex case assembly than the Overseas, this cost me $910 to service with JLC 2 years ago. So just to give you an idea of a movement of considerable complexity, an articulated case that pivots on ball bearings, that was $910. So I'd say Brian is looking at a good ballpark, with $1,300 probably being the high estimate. If the watch needs things like hands, crowns, if the stem's been damaged, that's definitely a service plus a parts job.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Moving on. So
another watch that we've got on the table tonight.
Yeah. So so for another brand that I think has done amazing things over the last 5 years is Grand Seiko, and I say that because 5 years ago I think Grand Seiko was unknown in the United States. So for a long time, Grand Seiko was only available in Japan, as well as select retailers all across the world, and they're starting to slowly get their story out there, and watch collectors are starting to take notice. And I think that they've done a great job of keeping the market extremely tight, coming out with great limited editions that bring retail, if not above retail, and 3, keeping true to their roots, and continuing to innovate and doing things that people even in the Swiss watch industry aren't doing. And I think that it's becoming one of those things where you know, once niche no longer becomes niche, and you think, you know, I use NOMOS as an example, you know, where a few years ago, you know, that was the, you know, the niche brand that you would only see at a couple select retailers, and now it's gone a little bit more mainstream, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that now that new brand where people won't really recognize it unless you're really into watches is Grand Seiko, and I think you're going to see a lot more great things coming from them in the future.
Yeah, great brand, and like Brian said, a big part of their story arc over the last 5 years has just been establishing themselves in some major markets. You know, they opened their first US boutique in 2014. They launched a whole line of new models to a market that had never really seen them, except for some watch nerds who were willing to go on like Japanese eBay and place bids for stuff on the other side of the world. So in addition to opening big markets, they've been releasing strong watches, and 2017 was a big year for them. They stepped aside from the Seiko branding.
And I mean, they stepped aside from the Seiko branding, which for Americans, they might not realize how big a deal that is, but for the Japanese, I mean, it's like monumental. And I mean, you know, back to Seiko, another amazing watch that they came out with is the 1965 homage to their original diver.
Yes.
And I mean, the watch is gorgeous. And you know, I'd put it up against any, you know, $3,000 to $5,000 sport watch, and it's just, you know, it's beautiful, and it's a great option if you're looking for something a little obscure.
That is a great value, though, because that's actually a Seiko with a Grand Seiko movement in it.
Prospect, I think it's.
I think they're calling it the SLA 17. It's a replica of Seiko's first mid-60s dive watch, nicknamed the 62 MAS. It's a limited edition Seiko, but with a Grand Seiko movement. And you know, like Brian said, that's a killer. I mean, that's a killer value for what they're asking, because you're effectively getting Grand Seiko quality at a Seiko price.
Yeah, so that's two. Third one is Omega. So I think that in the last 5 years, they have done an amazing job of A, making themselves more relevant, B, going head to head with the Crown, which I think that a lot of people thought that was, I mean, there was a death spiral going on, but they've really come back huge. And they've come out with amazing limited editions, from the Speedy Tuesday to the Snoopy to their re-edition of the original.
Got the Railmaster,
the Railmaster, Speedmaster,
Seamaster,
and the Seamaster. And you know, I think that all sort of started with the dark side, and I think that was, you know, they came out with something different and unique, and people really, you know, really took to it. And I think from that point on, you've seen a lot of people looking at Omega in a way that they didn't look at it before. And you know, even down to, you know, the Seamaster 300Ms, there's renewed interest. And what they've done a really good job too of is, at least here in the States, is focus on Seamaster and Speedmaster, and not say like, oh, you know, we need people to buy DeVilles and Constellations and things that, you know what, it's just not an American watch. And they, you know, and as a result of that, they've come out with a great selection of core product that I think speaks to at least the American consumer.
Yeah, and when Brian talks about watches that are not American products, the DeVille plays better in Europe than it plays elsewhere. The Constellation plays better in Asia than it plays elsewhere. It's the Speedmaster and the Seamaster lines that are just universal. And I think they've done a great job there of also building brand equity, because when you look at something like the ... of the Moon series, these are manufacturer movement ceramic cased watches that retail around the $12,000 mark, and the design was so good, thoughtfully executed, and worthwhile, that when they charged $12,000 for an Omega, people nodded their heads and said yes, it felt right. And the watches sold at list, and they're still in demand. And I think that's the ultimate measure of a brand, if it can go up market without pushback, and they did that.
And you're seeing, again, where you're seeing limited editions in the, you know, into the thousands, have A, wait lists of thousands of people, and B, bringing well over the list price. And I think that, you know, it shows the strength of the brand and the value that people associate with, you know, with the product. And I just was speaking to somebody today who was in between getting a 300M Seamaster or a sub. And, you know, it sort of came down to, he's like, I really like both watches. I want something that is, I'm not going to see everywhere, and I mean, again, you are probably going to see a lot of Seamaster 300Ms, but you know, the value proposition between 4,400 versus 8,550 is huge, and I just think that you know, a lot of people have taken notice.
And it's not an easy thing to do. Recall that Tag Heuer has had fits trying to move up market, and in 2014 they all but gave up on the idea that they would be mainstreaming $5,000 to $15,000 Tag Heuers. They said, we're going to be the $1,000 to $5,000 watch. Going up market didn't work. With Omega, it's been successful, and you could arguably say that back in the days of the first brand ambassadors in the modern era, Schumacher and, you know, George Clooney and Pierce Brosnan, as corny as it seems, that was paired with real investment and substance with the coaxial movements, calibers. You know, the march up to the 8500 and the 9300 started in the early 2000s, even though we started seeing those in the late 2000s. So this is really the apex of a long uphill hike for Omega. The last 5 years might have been the most dramatic, but this is proof across several different management teams that Omega's been on the right track.
And I think they've also taken notice of like the lifestyle that's surrounding the brand. Some of their better selling watches now have NATO straps, leather straps that come with it, so people sort of understand, you know, the brand has recognized that there's a community of people buying these watches. And at the same time, I think they've done better than most brands digitally. Talking to their clients online, and they've had a couple successful online launches of products that have done great.
So a question from Adam J. Odell. I just want to address this because the chat box is moving fast and CQ can't handle all of the stream himself. But he's saying, Tim, I need a white dial sports dress watch for around $8,000 to $10,000. And he's remarkably open-minded because he's cross-shopping the IWC Portuguese Automatic 5001 with the FP Journe Elegante 48. And I would say this, unless you're of the type who doesn't do quartz, and I imagine since you're considering the Elegante, you're not that type, the Elegante is more special. It feels more special. It looks more special. The IWC is a great watch, and if that's your platonic ideal of a dress watch, you're going to be very happy with it. But if you're agnostic between the two, the Elegante 48 is a very special offbeat watch that is characteristic of its maker, and you'll probably never see another one.
Another good one would be the Jaeger True Beat.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to go with something like the Geophysic True Second,
time only, silver dial,
maybe a little bit too plain. I think the IWC Portuguese gives you a few different dial tone options, like I think you can get blue hands and blue print. There are a couple of different things you can do there, but I will say this, the Elegante 48, and this is important to me, I have it on authority that you can swim with that watch. So a lot of folks ask, and that's a decision point for some, can I wear the watch as a dress watch but also swim in it, since it's technically a sporty Journe with titanium and a screw down and a rubber strap? Yeah, you can swim with it, and that would be my choice between the two. Would you also argue that if you bought both of those pre-owned, the Journe would probably be easier to sell?
More than likely. I mean, the Journe Elegante 48 happens to sell very close to retail, and I think that a lot of people don't realize just how few of the watches that he makes. And there's times where we just have none in stock, and we don't really even have an idea of when the next one's coming in. So I think overall those watches have done incredibly new, and they do even better pre-owned. And I think the biggest, I shouldn't even say surprise, because the moment we saw the watch, we knew guys were going to be buying it.
We saw the ladies Elegante, and we said a guy might wear that, without
and then
the gems.
I think that ironically, all the Elegante 48s are going to men, and it's the entry-level price point into the brand. And interestingly enough, watch collectors are okay with it being quartz, and they don't care. They love the way the watch looks. They love the big lume on the dial, and it's Francois Paul's way of doing quartz. So
it feels like a Journe. You hold it in your hand,
exactly.
It feels like a Journe, and that's important. So I would say go with that, no regrets. Okay, so my three brands, now here are my storylines for the last half decade. I actually agreed with Brian's assessment of AP, so we were totally on board there, but I do diverge when things turn to Tudor. This is a company that as of 2003-2004 officially withdrew from the US market, and I use the US market as a bellwether because it's neither a very new nor very old watch market. It's kind of an in-betweener, and as a national market for a lot of brands, it's the largest single country. So 2013, Tudor relaunches here, and within 4 years, they have 3 model lines between the Pelagos, the Black Bay, and the Heritage Chronos that are borderline iconic. They have huge momentum, wind in their sails, and it's like they were never gone. In fact, they feel stronger in some respects than the likes of Breitling and Tag, and I would say in terms of brand equity, they're as strong as Omega right now. All this from a standing start. I gotta say this, I mean, Omega, the Speedmaster Professional, the Moonwatch, that's forever. The Seamaster collection will always have a clientele, but they do have a lot of collections that don't sell. Whereas Tudor had a much better strike rate for its debut collections, and I would even say its most underrated watch is its best, the Tudor Heritage Advisor. So this is a company that I think was launched strong, got stronger, and again, they were starting from almost nothing. The right watches for our times at the right price. You hold it in your hand, and you feel like this is better than a Rolex from 10, 15 years ago. Now, granted, Rolex is 2 or 3 times better than it was 10 or 15 years ago, but that's how close Tudor is running its sister brand. And I would also say that I did an IW Magazine interview with Stephen Forsey last year, and I asked him who outside of his own brand has impressed him the most in the watch industry, and one of the 2 he named was actually Tudor, for the way they rebuilt the brand with a combination of substance and nostalgia style.
Well, I think for Tudor too, one of the big reasons it didn't work in the States was because it was always sold as sort of being, if you can't afford to buy a Rolex, you buy a Tudor.
Well, they used to be stamped Rolex on certain components.
Exactly. So you had a lot of people that were made to sort of feel like, oh, I can't afford a Rolex, I should buy a Tudor. Like, they just wouldn't buy either. So now, you know, Rolex has gone in a, I shouldn't even say a completely different direction, but based on the improvements of the watches, ceramic bezels and things like that, and the price points jumping up, the, you know, having Black Bays coming in at around $3,000 or so with that sort of, you know, vintage style really struck people at exactly the right time. And, you know, the whole vintage movement, you know, was sort of in the upswing too when the watch came out. And yeah.
Just good watches for our times, and really the text, there needs to be like a business school case study where you research the launch of Tudor in the US market. Because again, this is a brand that had absolutely nothing going on for decades, left the market, and then came back so strong you would think they've been here forever. But I will say this, okay, Tag Heuer, guys, a lot went on in the last 5 years.
That was on my, like, it was like my fourth.
That was your bubble brand.
That was my bubble brand.
So since 2013, okay, Jean-Christophe Babin, Stéphane Linder, and JCB, Jean-Claude Pivert, have held the wheel at this brand. And it's like one of those choose your own adventure books from when you're in like 3rd, 4th grade, because there are so many different things going on at the same time. You have to remember, like, am I turning to page 45 if I take the blue pill, or 48 if I take the red pill? But it's just the kind of thing where they decided in 2014 they were going to refocus on the $1,000 to $5,000 watch market to get millennials. But they were also going to be the brand for cheap grand complications with a $40,000 carbon V4 Monaco and a $15,000 tourbillon. And just for comparison, the original versions of the V4 Monaco were well into 6 figures, and $15,000 for a tourbillon, that should say it all. But they're also going to sell smartwatches for the general public, and vintage tribute watches for watch snobs, plus oversized watches for guys who maybe aspire to Hublot but can't quite swing it just yet. Sister brand, it makes sense, right? But all these things at once, there's a lot of churn going on here.
Well, I think you saw like a bell curve. So it's like, you know, I think that it depended on who was running the brand at the time. And, you know, they brought prices down, which was a big positive that they've done more recently. And they've sort of moved away from those higher complication pieces, which wasn't really the base of the brand. They've moved to lower price point watches. They've gotten back to the roots. They now are having some vintage inspired pieces. They've got the smart watches.
They are coming full circle though, because that long dead, like, CH30/caliber 1969, like that dead movement that they were making in Chevenet, it's back as the Heuer 03 and the Ottavia re-edition. So it's almost like they're back to where they were before the reboot in 2014. Tag, none of these are bad ideas. Any single one of them could form the basis of a very strong luxury watch brand. But at some point, you have to choose your own adventure and turn to the right page. So,
and the tourbillon has actually done amazingly well.
It's a nice watch.
I mean, it's a very nice watch.
I am impressed. I mean, the material quality is there, but again, choose your own adventure. You can't choose them all. So Bulgari. Now here's a company that really impressed me. JCB joined in 2013, and no, I don't mean Jean-Claude Pivert, Jean-Christophe Babin, the exact same man who had been helming Tag Heuer. Well, he's on a winning streak because he went to Bulgari, and what had seemed at first like an assembly of purchased parts, case makers, dial makers, there was the Gerald Genta manufacturer in Le Sentier, artisans who were brought in to do enameling, gem setting, engraving, guilloche. I would say about 2014, a year after the other JCB arrived, and you saw the debut of the Octo Finissimo tourbillon. And this was the beginning of a run in which all of those purchased pieces start to look and feel like a manufactured watch brand. 2016, we got the ultra-thin minute repeater. 2016, we also got the very affordable Diagonal Chronograph Magnesium series with the Motorlac grained lacquered dial for sub $5,000. And then this year, we got the incredible Octo Finissimo Automatics, an in-house ultra-thin micro-rotor movement, beautifully made for between $13,000 and $14,000. I look at it, I hold it in my hand, I nod my head yes. Not just that, but worth every penny and not a stunt. They have water resistance. You can actually strap them onto your wrist without bending the case and popping the crystal.
The titanium bracelet's amazing too. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell from the pictures, but I mean, the watch could not be more comfortable even on the bracelet.
I had a chance to try it on a strap and the titanium bracelet. They're both fantastic, and again, the price is right. $14,000 with the bracelet.
Yeah.
Like, that's a legitimate Royal Oak and Aquanaut and overseas alternative.
And you're not going to see too many people wearing them. That's that's another great part of it.
And they got the style right. Granted, the Octo case was inherited from Gerald Genta, but they've made it their own in a way that feels organic. Also, you know, they've finally, with the Diagono Bellissimo and the Octo chronographs, they have found a way to case up the El Primero movement in, you know, a suit that gives it style to match the substance. For years, the El Primero was a rock star movement looking for the right set of shoes. And with Bulgari, which is LVMH sister company to Zenith, you finally got a look that absolutely matches the panache of the El Primero movement. And finally, I'm just going to say, a lot of these designs are better executions than in the Gerald Genta era. A lot of the Gentas were a little bit freakish. I think the Bulgaris across the range are just stronger. And I will also say this, with Serpenti, they have a real tradition in haute de gamme women's watches and métier d'art, something that goes back to the 1940s, so while everyone else is kind of doing a Me Too ladies watch line, Bulgari can actually say Serpenti, which is over the top in style, is authentic to their history, and it honestly takes a tremendous amount of work to make these watches.
And I think with the Octo, they've been trying to sort of find their way over the last several years and sort of find that watch that hits the button, that they can then get exposure, get them on people's wrists, because that's the goal, is really when you have a watch like this, you want to get it on people's wrists, you want to get it out there so that collectors and enthusiasts take notice, and then you can build upon that momentum and come out with other watches. So I think that this was definitely a winner for the brand.
Yeah, so Bulgari, again, a collection of parts 5 years ago, feeling very much like an accomplished manufacturer today, making every part of the watch in-house in many cases, and when they don't, offering attractive price points that just hit the meat of the market. I really love that Diagono chronograph magnesium with the motor lac dial. I just think they're doing something right at every price point and for men and women, and it looks good, it feels good. Honorable mention, I'm going to say Maitre du Temps with the Chapter 3. This is a company that made impressive but freakishly oversized watches, came into its own with the very wearable dual-time Chapter 3. I'm also going to say Hublot. The last 5 years, we've seen the arrival of the Big Bang Unicos, the Ferrari series. The MP collection has really come into its own. We've seen the Classic Fusion come to rival the Big Bang as like an iconic model line with them. And for me, that's a more grown-up look. That's Hublot coming of age. So I would like to say a lot changed there. The price spread broadened, more materials were offered. They're doing a lot more work in-house. I think Hublot has kind of grown up.
I feel like you picked a lot more than 3 brands.
Well, honorable mention.
Cheated.
Yeah, the Dean's list was long. Brian, our favorite non-Swiss brands.
Okay, so I don't think we have that much time left.
We don't, but we've got enough time.
We've got time for this. So
we've always got time. We sell watches.
Exactly. So first, I picked Panerai.
Yeah.
Because it's technically an Italian brand.
Yeah.
And Wikipedia says that it's headquartered in Italy, which I already knew. But no. So Panerai would be 1. Grand Seiko would be number 2. And Sarpaneva was actually my number 3.
Yeah.
So I've been a big fan of, Panerai and Grand Seiko, we talk a lot about. It's sort of explainable why those would be some of our favorite non-Swiss brands.
But it's worth repeating, especially with Panerai, because people do think, oh, well, they're made in Switzerland. Even in the era of the combat Panerai 3646s, they were made by Rolex. So, back then, the only thing Panerai supplied was the dial luminescence. So it's correct to say Panerai is an Italian brand, because it always has been Italian-Swiss.
And I think they're still inspired by those, by their Italian heritage and, the sport watches that they make.
And if you've ever met Angelo Bonatti, trust me, it's an Italian brand.
And then for Grand Seiko, again, it's Japanese through and through. From the way that they market the product, the attention to detail, the innovation.
The themes they choose for some of the watches.
Exactly.
Like they had the Onbashira limited edition. What's the Onbashira? Well, it's a festival where they basically ride logs down a hill. and people like it mangled, and they've been doing this for over 1,000 years.
Sold out limited edition above retail, right?
That's a limited edition from Grand Seiko. It's not like, oh, well, we're going to put Mount Fuji on the dial, and or we're gonna sell it with like a set of like, I don't know.
I would like one with Mount Fuji.
Yeah, or like a gift certificate to Benihana's. They didn't do anything that's cliched. They did stuff that's deeply rooted in the heritage. And a lot of stuff that's so inside, they've got to explain to you how it's related to Japanese culture. And that's bold, not making something that's instantly accessible and crowd-pleasing. That shows discipline.
Mm-hmm. And my third is Sarpaneva, who is a Finnish watchmaker. And we actually, many years ago, saw him displaying at Baselworld.
Yes.
And he still, I think, is only making a couple hundred watches a year. But his product was absolutely beautiful. And we fell in love with, well, everybody else was doing, your standard chronographs and this and that. He decided that he was going to specialize in the moon phase.
And that his moon phase would look like him.
Pretty much. And it was a different way of doing it. And I think that it's a complication that, for the most part, like, people, A, never set it, and B, it sort of falls by the wayside because it's not that functional. And
it's romantic, though.
Yeah. But so he took that complication and he made it his own, and the watch came out beautifully, and the case was unique. He was making all the watches himself, and I think that he built upon that momentum. He did the watch with mb&f.
Yeah, he did.
And
the Moon Machine, I think it was.
The Moon Machine. And and I think that it's actually one of the few watches my dad has is one of the original Sarpanevas in red gold.
And let me throw this out there: SUF, Sarpaneva Uran fabric. It's like a Tudor for a micro brand. Like, Tudor is the sister brand to Rolex that's more accessible. SUF is the more accessible Sarpaneva. So you take a micro brand with its own micro sister brand. Sarpaneva Uran fabric, the watches are very affordable. I want to say like $5,000–6,000 US. So that's the added value from the Sarpaneva. Quarter of the world up in Finland. Okay, so for me, I'm going to lead with a Lange Sohne because I think we take them for granted. They've been part of Richemont now for 15 years. They are a brand that is well established and commercially familiar, but just looking at what was built after the fall of the wall from 1990 when the company was reestablished, they built something that, in terms of product quality in your hand, is legitimately a challenge to Patek Philippe. And with the 1999 datograph, they genuinely fired a shot across Patek's bow that forced Patek to raise its game, and they did, and Patek deserves credit for that. But the influence, I think the prolific engineering, the traditions, almost everything we call like glasuta, wristwatch finishing tradition today, is something Lange created in the last 20 years. I think in the year that Walter Lange died, and I think a lot of folks are asking, where does this brand stand in the pantheon? It's worth reminding everyone, from the Terra Luna to the Richard Lange Pour le Mérite, to the most simple watch in the Saxonia collection, this is one of the most important brands of modern times. Whether it's hip at the moment, whether it's a commercial favorite, regardless of retail, the bottom line is this is one of the most important modern brands, and absolutely what you get in the hand from Lange is as good as anything made anywhere in the world. Groennfell, two friendly guys from Holland. These are the Groennfell brothers, Tim and Bart. They used to work for Audemars Piguet, Renault Papi. They did high complications work for a long time before striking out on their own.
There's been a lot of people that have come out of there.
Yeah.
Speak Marin, like a lot of the big niche guys have come out of.
I think Rubel and Force both did too.
So,
but here's the thing.
It must be good.
They're fun dudes. They're in like Oldenzaal in the Netherlands. They are so relaxed about custom stuff. Some independent brands are like, no, the Meister sees it one way and it will only be made that way. They'll do anything you want. The Groennfell brothers will do just about anything in terms of guilloche and enameling and engraving and customization. They make interesting watches. They have only a few basic models, but they're all excellent. Of their 3 basic models, 2 of them are GPHG award winners, and all of them are spectacular. Whether you're going with the 1 Hertz, the Parallax Tourbillon, the 1941 Remontoir, you're going to get function, engineering, and you're also going to get finishing. Stainless steel bridges, hardly anyone does that. Why? Because it's really hard. This is an awesome brand, and again, it's like Habring, but at a much higher price. You're going to have a relationship with the guy whose name is on the watch, and they're fun dudes. Finally, Pita Barcelona, because I love them, and I love them endlessly. And they actually emailed me one time when I mentioned them.
I don't even know what Pita Barcelona is.
Okay, Anacido Jimenez and his son Daniel, working out of Barcelona, make watches. The father is a member of the AHCI, along with the likes of, Kari Voutilainen and Francois Paul Journe.
Do we have a picture up?
Philippe Dufour. We do have a picture up. They make watches. They make a carousel watch that costs only a few $1,000s. They make dive watches with patented magnetic setting mechanisms. They make the Molinos open, fully skeletonized watch. They make the Roadster sports chronograph. So many models and only a few dozen watches made each year by essentially 2 people. Fantastic quality, fair prices, and as with the Groennfelds, but again at a much lower price, a lot of customization available. You want your watch in steel, they can do that. You want your watch in bronze, they can do that too. And an amazing number of models and choices considering just how few absolute watches they produce. I love them. Relentless innovation and value from Spain. Plus, hey, they emailed me. How cool is that? So, Pita Barcelona, I love you guys. Brian, thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
Guys, Brian is going to be my regular guest in this Wednesday slot. Mike Michaels is going to alternate with me in future episodes, but Brian is here to stay. He's a fun guy. He's a great co-host. I know he's going to do a great job with the Wednesday slot. But tonight, I'm Tim. He's Brian. They're the 3 amigos. This is What You Want, and thanks for logging on.
Thank you.